There's a difference between being productive and being in motion. And I want you to really think about that for a second, because most people have never separated those two things. And that one distinction might be the most important thing I say in this entire video. You can be incredibly busy. You can fill every hour. You can end every day exhausted. You can have a full calendar, a long to-do list, and the unmistakable feeling that you've worked hard today and still be going nowhere. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because activity and progress are not the same thing. And maybe nobody ever told you that the most dangerous kind of busy is the kind that feels productive, but isn't pointed at anything that actually matters. That's what this video is about. I'm Brian Nichols, founder of Solving for Change, and I want to describe something I've watched happen in some of the most capable, driven leaders I've ever coached. They're not struggling with effort. That's never the issue. These are people who work harder than almost anyone around them. They're the first ones in and the last ones out. They respond to every email, show up to every meeting, tackle every fire that gets thrown at them. And at the end of the week, when they finally stop long enough to breathe, something doesn't add up. The effort was real, the exhaustion is real, but the progress, it's harder to point to. The things that actually matter, the important project, the strategic initiative, the relationship that needs attention, the goal they set at the beginning of the year, somehow never made it to the top of the pile because the pile was always on fire. And slowly, a question starts forming they're almost afraid to ask out loud. Is all of this actually going anywhere? If you've ever asked that question, even quietly, even just to yourself, this video is for you. Here's the reframe. In Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, there's a moment where Alice comes to a fork in the road and asks the Cheshire Cat which way she should go. The cat asks where she wants to get to. Alice says she doesn't really know. And the cat says something that has always stayed with me. Then it doesn't matter which way you go. Most people are living that conversation at a scale they don't fully recognize. They're making decisions every single day about where to spend their time, their energy, their attention, but they've never clearly answered the prior question. Where am I actually trying to get to? What am I building? How do I want to feel on the journey? What does progress actually look like for me in this season of my life? Without those answers, every road looks as good as every other. And the one that gets taken is usually just the most urgent one. Urgency is not the same as importance. Let me say that again, because it's the insight that changes everything. Urgency is not the same as importance. Urgent things are loud. They demand attention right now. They have deadlines and notifications and people waiting on responses. Important things are typically quiet. They don't send alerts. They just wait patiently, silently, while the urgent things consume every hour of every day. And the most capable, driven people I know are the most susceptible to this trap because they're so good at handling what's urgent that the important things never even fight for space. And then they just quietly disappear. And here's what that looks like when it reaches its most extreme conclusion. In 1945, World War II ended. Unfortunately, Hiroo Onoda didn't get the memo. Onoda was a Japanese intelligence officer stationed on Labong Island in the Philippines. In the final months of the war, he'd been given clear orders by his commanding officer: never surrender. Fight until you receive official orders otherwise. And Onoda, a man of extraordinary discipline, resourcefulness, and commitment, took those orders seriously. The war ended in August of 1945. Onoda kept fighting. Leaflets were dropped on the island telling him the war was over. He didn't believe them. He assumed they were Allied propaganda. His comrades surrendered or died one by one. He kept fighting. Search parties were sent to find him. He evaded them. His own family came to the island to call for him. He didn't come out. For 29 years, Hiroo Onoda continued his mission. He lived in the Philippine jungle. He maintained his uniform. He kept his rifle in working order. He executed guerrilla operations against local residents and police well into the 1970s. Yes, you heard me correctly, the 1970s. He was not a man who lacked discipline. He was not a man who lacked commitment. He was not a man who lacked effort. He was a man who had completely lost the trajectory and had no mechanism to recalibrate. Finally, in March of 1974, a Japanese adventurer named Norio Suzuki found Onoda in the jungle and brought word of what had happened. But Onoda wouldn't stand down for just anyone. He would only lay down his arms for his commanding officer. And so the Japanese government tracked down his former commander, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, who had long since retired and was working as a bookstore owner, and flew him to the Philippines. On March 9, 1974, Major Taniguchi stood before Onoda in the jungle and officially relieved him of duty. Hiroo Onoda, now 52 years old, emerged from the jungle in his original military uniform, his rifle still in working order. 29 years after the war he'd been fighting had ended. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't undisciplined. He wasn't lacking in effort or commitment or courage. He was maximally busy, executing a mission that no longer existed, with no way of knowing it, and no daily practice of asking whether what he was doing still connected to anything real. That's not a story about war. That's a story about what happens when activity completely disconnects from direction. And it's more common than most of us would like to admit. So how do you make sure you're not Hiroo Onoda? Here are 3 things that make the difference. Number 1, separate motion from direction. Motion is activity. Direction is purposeful movement towards something specific. You can have enormous amounts of motion with very little direction. And you can have steady, unhurried direction with far less motion than you'd expect. The question that separates the two is simple, and most people never ask it or never ask it often enough. Does this connect to what I'm actually building? Not, is this urgent? Not, did somebody ask me for this? Not, will I look busy if I do this? Does this connect to what I'm building today, now, in this season? When you start filtering your days through that question, something remarkable happens. The to-do list doesn't shrink, but your relationship to it completely changes. Some things move from must do to doesn't matter. Others move from someday to today. The noise starts to separate from the signal. You can't navigate well without a destination. Pick one. Decide if it's the right one, and then let it filter everything else. Number 2, protect the important things before the urgent ones arrive. Here's the uncomfortable truth about urgency. It will always win in a fair fight. Urgent things have deadlines. They have people waiting. They have consequences for not showing up right now. Important things many times have none of that. They just have long-term significance, which is genuinely terrible leverage in a world that rewards immediate response. So the only way the important things get done is if you stop giving urgency a fair fight. That means protecting time for what matters before the urgent things start arriving, before the inbox is open, before the notifications are live, before someone else has defined what your morning looks like. The leaders I've coached who are most effective at this don't fight urgency all day. They get ahead of it. They carve out the time and the clarity they need before the day tries to take it from them. That window, however short, is where direction lives. Protect it like it's the most important appointment on your calendar, because it is. Number 3, check your trajectory every single day, not just when you're lost. Onoda went 29 years without a trajectory check, not because he was negligent, but because he had no system for it. You don't need 29 years. A week of operating off an outdated map is enough to start pulling you off course. A month of reacting to urgency without checking direction is enough to make the important things feel like they belong to someone else's life. What changes everything is a daily practice of intentional orientation. A few minutes every morning to ask, what am I building? What matters most today? And does what I'm about to do connect to either of those things? For me, and for the members of Solving for Change, that practice is called My Daily Compass. And I have a dedicated video coming up that walks through exactly how it works, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that one. But here's the principle right now. You don't find your direction in the middle of a busy day. You establish it before the busy day begins. That's the difference between someone who ends every week exhausted and someone who ends every week with a clear sense of what they built. Here's a practical next step I want to point you to before you go. If you're not sure where the trajectory disconnect is showing up for you right now, whether it's at work, at home, or just in how you're spending your days, I want to invite you to take a free assessment at solvingforchange.com. It's designed to give you a clear, honest picture of where you are right now, where you're strong, where there are gaps, and where your most important next step actually is. It literally takes about 2 minutes. It costs nothing, and it gives you a personalized picture of where to start, not a generic answer, but your answer. The link is in the description below. And if you're watching on your TV right now, the QR code is on your screen. Take it from your phone. And if you want to go deeper, a Solving for Change membership is built around weekly masterclass training designed to help you solve the exact challenges that change creates in your work and in your life. My Daily Compass is the daily practice. The masterclasses are the deep work. Together, they build the system. Here's what I want to leave you with today. Hiroo Onoda wasn't a man who didn't try. He was one of the most committed, disciplined, dedicated people you'll ever read about. He just had no way of knowing that the mission he was executing with everything he had ended 29 years before anyone told him. Don't let that be your story. You have something Onoda didn't have. You have this moment right now to stop, to look up, and to ask the question that changes everything. Am I pointed at something that actually matters? The only constant in life is change, but when it hits, your direction doesn't have to get lost in the motion. I'll see you in the next video. If this one hit home, go ahead and subscribe. We've got a lot of ground to cover, and I don't want you to miss what's coming. And if you know someone who's been grinding without a clear sense of where it's all going, share this with them. The Onoda story alone might be the thing that shifts something for them.